And our meeting tonight is now open for sharing testimonies of healing through Christian Science. Jim from Arizona, go ahead.
Good evening. Last Wednesday, I dialed into the Wednesday meeting, and I was very disappointed because the prelude was much distorted, and oftentimes the sound faded into nothing. I was inspired to try to hear it on the computer. What a difference! The remainder of the prelude was outstanding. Naturally, I repeated the event this evening, and we had a beautiful and wonderful prelude. In order to give a testimony, however, I had to retreat from the computer and again pick up the telephone. But I am very, very grateful I have discovered this with the help of my practitioner. Thank you.
Thank you. Gary.
Mary thought the readings tonight might be a little heavy for some people. So I'd like to tell you a little story. First of all, I wanted to point out that in the readings and throughout the New Testament, every time Jesus had to give a stern rebuke, he followed that by healing a lot of people of a lot of diseases. You might ask yourself, what do strong rebukes and healing have to do with one another? Well, when I first came to this church, I was under the false impression that to be a Christian Scientist, you had to be loving, had to be sweet, you had to be diplomatic. And shortly after I arrived, our fine practitioner and teacher, Mrs. Evans, started to remind us that we were in the middle of a battle, and we better be fighting on the right side of that battle. And at first, I didn't like that. I didn't like the idea that we had to be in a battle, because I thought as Christian Scientists we were supposed to be diplomatic and loving and let love sort of do its thing, whatever that was. But I was having some problems because I was afraid to speak up to people at times when it was necessary, because I was afraid of hurting their feelings. And I was having a hard time in business because I was avoiding confrontational situations. Didn't like them, didn't know how to deal with them, so I avoided them. And I missed a lot of opportunities to deal with things the way they should be dealt with in business. So in short, I was becoming kind of unhappy with myself as a result of this misconception. And it got really bad, but Mrs. Evans kept reminding us that we were in a battle and we'd better be fighting on the right side. Then one morning, I woke up and it just clicked. I said, yeah, okay, there is a battle. And I'm in it. God, what do you want me to do? And the battle wasn't personal. It was battle with evil. What Mrs. Eddy calls the carnal mind. Battle against false beliefs. And it wasn't personal. It wasn't a battle against people. It was against the false beliefs that enslave people and try to harm people. I was reminded that Mrs. Eddy says in her textbook that Jesus rebuked sinners pointedly and unflinchingly because he was their friend. He loved enough to tell people what they needed. Not what they wanted, but what they needed. And he took a lot of heat for it. He took the ultimate heat. They crucified him. because they didn't like what he said. And if Jesus loved enough to do that, could I do anything less? That was when I realized that my reluctance to speak up was gross selfishness. I wasn't concerned about those people. I was concerned about myself. I was afraid to take the heat if I told someone something they didn't like. Well, when I realized this, things began to change in my life. I became less concerned about hurting people's feelings and more concerned about doing what was right for them, or saying what was right for them. I realized I needed to love more. And I stopped taking things personally. When I felt the heat, I realized it wasn't an attack on me, it was an attack on the truth. And I can honestly say that as a result of that very fundamental change, I'm a lot happier. I've found a peace that I didn't know. I have a lot more confidence that God is in control of my life. And I'm certain that I'm a much healthier person than I otherwise would have been. So, what do stern rebukes and healing have to do with one another? All error needs to be rebuked, whether it calls itself sin or disease. It is not of God. It is not condoned by God. It needs to be rebuked. And that is how Jesus healed both sin and disease. And that is how he instructed us to heal. I'm so grateful for this practitioner and teacher who taught me this invaluable lesson. And I'm so grateful to Mary Baker Eddy for fighting the battle before us and winning and showing us what the battle really is. This is the Christian warfare. So good to be with you all tonight.
Thank you. Luann from New York, go ahead.
Thank you. For the past few months, I had been getting all wrapped up in the affairs of my life. It seemed like the whole world was crashing down on me. I began trying to solve all my problems alone. It was making me frustrated, and I became very depressed. It seemed like one thing just piled up on the next until I was buried in despair. I could not find the positive side of things. I could feel myself being pulled down. The longer it went on, the more difficult it was to call upon my practitioner for help, even though I knew it was the only way out. Before coming into Christian Science, I would often turn to prescription medication when things began to overwhelm me. It was my way of running away from problems. Having been in science for about 5 years now and being healed of the desire to self-medicate when things got rough, enabled me to hold on to enough truth and a strong love for God. My practitioner told me one time not to let anything steal my testimony. Remembering that helped me to regain the strength to fight this thing that was pulling me away from God, and I called her. After a few conversations/rebukes about pride, depersonalizing, and standing up for myself, I could feel my burdens lifting. The truth she shared with me helped me to refocus all my thoughts on God and the many blessings he has bestowed upon me and my family. I began to regain my joy and work with a pure desire to do God's will, love as he loves, and bless others as I have been so deeply blessed. Going through all of this enabled me to discover many things about myself and a lot about God and Christian Science that I had been taken for granted. One thing I have learned since coming here for help is that no matter how dark things seem, there is always a light. All I have to do is reach out for it, and God will be there. I'm so grateful for this lesson that taught me how important it is to pray without ceasing and continuously abide in Christ. I am deeply grateful for the commitment of my practitioner to God and this science that has helped me, strengthened me, and blessed me in so many wonderful ways. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Shahidat from Maryland, go ahead.
Good evening. Thank you so much for those readings tonight. I really enjoyed them. I generally walk my dog during my morning church watch before work. Last Thursday morning, during our walk, I felt an intense wave of discouragement that made it very difficult to concentrate on the watch during my assigned time. I had been working on memorizing some Psalms as was discussed in a roundtable for a few weeks back. So when I could no longer concentrate on the watch, I instead started to pray with Psalm 23 until the wave of discouragement had lifted. And when I got back home, I re-listened to the previous night's Wednesday testimony service, which cleared everything out. Anything that was left was cleared out. I just want to say how grateful I am for these testimony services and grateful for the roundtable, and I'm happy to be here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Barbara from Pennsylvania, go ahead.
Hi. When I was a couple of years into my acquaintance with Christian Science, I came down with a heavy cold, and after about 3 days of praying on my own, I remembered Mrs. Eddy's words in Science and Health: if students do not readily heal themselves, they should early call an experienced Christian scientist to aid them. Though I don't think I remembered it at the time, this sentence follows: if they are unwilling to do this for themselves, they need only to know that error cannot produce this unnatural reluctance. Well, I was very reluctant to call, I think due to pride. Nevertheless, I did call, in this case a Christian Science practitioner, and it was out of a sincere desire to be obedient to Science and Health. This was well rewarded. When I had asked the practitioner to pray, she simply said, "Divine love does meet the human need." And of course, she said that with great conviction. Well, I felt the truth and power of that statement, however little I understood it. The cold symptoms were simply gone, except for a hoarse-sounding voice, which lingered for about a day, and there was such a sense of bountiful peace and joy. I'm grateful to God for this long-ago healing. It was decades before I had trouble with cold symptoms again. Now I'm working on the more that must be gained to continue in well-doing that Mrs. Eddy also speaks of. I think I have shared this experience before, but it seemed worthy of repeating. Thanks to Plainfield, I'm beginning to awake to the more that must be gained. Thank you.
Thank you. Luba from Ohio, go ahead.
I'm so grateful to Christian Science and this church for all I am learning, and I'm forever grateful to a loving and patient practitioner for her support, where I have learned the importance of patience, consistency, and most important, expectation. Mrs. Eddy said we should never give up. This has been so helpful, as the fear of food creating bodily issues has dominated my life for so many years. I was told that fear is the denial of God's allness, and I know that I am a reflection of God. I'm so grateful for the truth I am learning. Thank you so much for tonight's reading, and I'm grateful to be here this evening.
Thank you. Dave from Florida, go ahead.
Hi. Years ago, I developed a severe case of sciatica. It was no joke. I was only able to stand or walk for very short periods of time because the pain was so great. I asked a practitioner here for help, and while I don't remember the statements of truth she gave me, I do know she said I need to work on getting closer to God and make sure I was putting Him first in my life and in everything I do. As I did this, I could feel myself getting better. In a few months, I was absolutely fine, and there has been no recurrence of this problem. I'm very grateful for this healing. I'm grateful for Christian Science, to be a member of this church where it's practiced the way Mrs. Eddy intended it to be, and for the healing practitioners here. Thank you.
Thank you. Betty from California, go ahead.
Good evening. Thank you for the readings tonight and for the music. I wish to express my gratitude for being healed of having nosebleeds. And I have given this one before, but it just came to me that I really needed to give this one again. I'd had them since I was a kid. I'd had practitioner help from time to time for this and had been given a statement from Science and Health with Key to the Scriptures by Mary Baker Eddy to work with. It is, quote, Christian scientists must live under the constant pressure of the apostolic command to come out from the material world and be separate, unquote. Learning to use this statement helped tremendously. Often I was able to stop the nosebleeds quickly, sometimes even instantly. Then, when I received practitioner help from a Plainfield practitioner for a cold, I found myself healed of the cold and also of the nosebleeds. Took a couple of days to figure that out, but it was like, oh my gosh, I don't have any more nosebleeds. This happened close to 5 years ago, and I have been free of nosebleeds ever since. I am very grateful for this healing, for practitioner help over the years, and for Mrs. Eddy's pure Christian Science as taught in the Plainfield Church. Very grateful to be here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeremy.
I'm very grateful for the opportunity I've been given here in Plainfield to do work that has real meaning for the world. Every day has brought fresh challenges, and each of those challenges have shown me the only way that only by going to God will I get this work done, because it is all His work. When you look on the website now, you'll see on the gray bar that is just above the carousel, we've added 7 new languages. In addition to the Chinese, German, Spanish, French, Dutch, Hindi, Punjabi, and Urdu that we had, we now have Russian, Marathi, Nepali, Pashto, Persian, Sindhi, and Tamil. All of those are full websites that have Place by Mary Baker Eddy, the history of our church article, and the questions and answers page translated. And soon they will also have 500 watching points by Gilbert Carpenter as well. These new languages will allow this church to bring Christian Science to many millions of people in Iran, India, Singapore, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Afghanistan, Tajikistan, Russia, Uzbekistan, Dubai, Nepal, Sri Lanka, Madagascar, Indochina, Thailand, Eastern Africa, South Africa, Fiji, and the West Indies. When I first came to this church, I had no idea what was in store for me, and I certainly never would have envisioned all this. I'm always amazed at the many ways God is using our small group of workers to reach what is literally a worldwide congregation. What a wonderful blessing it is to be a part of the cause of Christian Science. I'm so grateful for this science, for this church, for practitioner support, and for every one of you who contribute to this mission. Thank you.
Thank you. Sharon.
Last year, I woke up one morning with a severe cold. I prayed. I knew I was wrapped in God's love, the warmth of God's love. I knew it wasn't from God, and I knew it was not the truth for me or anyone else. And the cold went away. Well, the next morning, it was Wednesday, and I woke up with a cough. And I thought, I better call a practitioner because I do not want to cough and disrupt the church service. So I called and I explained the situation, and she said to me, well, if it wasn't true yesterday, it's not true today. And that was the end of the cough. I am so grateful for the lessons I'm learning, the practical truth, and how God heals everything for everyone everywhere. And thank you for the wonderful readings.
Thank you. Linda.
Thank you very much for the readings and the music tonight. I want to express my gratitude tonight for the help of the Plainfield practitioners whose prayers healed me instantly of a sudden loss of fluids from a stomach problem. She answered my call with such love and strength in God's power and presence. At the time, I thought I was going to have to go to the emergency room. But as I hung up, the problem immediately stopped, like a faucet had been turned off. This experience had such a profound effect on me of the immediacy and power of this Christian Science prayer, and also brought a feeling of God's nearness and care. I'm very grateful for learning Christian Science at this church, and for Mrs. Eddy giving us this science and all the sacrifices she gave to do this, and for Christ Jesus' teachings. Thank you.
Thank you. Craig.
I want to give gratitude for Gary's readings that he gave. It was like asking us to recommit ourselves, and an invitation to everybody that with an ear of this to come join for something that's worthwhile to do in their life. I thank him. The music was inspiring, and I thank God for the practitioner help that I've had recently. It seems like I'm sure for all my doings that I slipped back thinking that I was a child other than a child of something beside God. I contribute that to being really involved with human relations, but I probably wasn't thinking of them as God's children, but thinking of them as my human relations. And I was having a hard time really feeling like I was really depending on the truth instead of just doing my human duties in a human way. And it came alive to me also when my son, who he's a good fella, but parenting requires a lot of God and God direction. And I remember when we first received him, or about to, he's adopted, our practitioner told us every good gift and every perfect gift is from above, cometh down from the Father of lights, in whom is no variable to the shadow of turning, and that's James 1, verse 17. And I realized that if, along with being told that heredity is not a law by Mary Vickeretti, that just as he came down from God, so did I, and I must hold to that and treat him as such in order for him to progress and to do right. And this has been a great help, reminding and inspiring me to stand more with the truth than just human doings. And I greatly appreciate it, because it's just like get me right back on the right path so things can work. And as a consequence, I found that I had a better sense of what was right for him and wrong, and wasn't. He asked to do something, and just something came over me that it was not the right thing for his best, wasn't best for him. But regardless of what humanly was told to me, I felt surely that something's wrong here. And I attest that to God. So I called this guidance counselor the next day, and she reaffirmed, this is not right. And that it was good that I called her. And because all the human arguments tell you one thing, but God tells you what is really right. And so, in proof of that, when I told him what was told to me, I had no pushback, no argument. He just accepted it, and we went about our way. I thank for God's guidance.
Thank you. Chardell.
Good evening, and thank you for those very powerful readings, and also our lovely music. We have been having some high winds lately, and I was praying about it, and it reminded me of our watches for the weather. Mrs. Eddy did this and had her students also pray about the weather. She once said, quote, "But no, the elements are in God's hand. The loving Father gives us what is for us. He is love, and love controls the elements." And that's from her quote, Spiritual Footsteps by Gilbert Carpenter. We had a winter storm some years ago, and I did pray knowing that God protects man and animals, always. The house is on a slope, so when a tree, a very tall tree, came down, it split and fell north and south, not east, down the slope that would have been to the roof. I was and remain very grateful for the proof of God's love. Since that time, we've had many testimonies about weather predictions, changing and then the blessings coming instead of reports of disaster. And that's happening in many areas besides the Northeast. I thank Mrs. Eddy for her teachings and how she studied the Bible, which resulted in her written works that are being shared with the world. Thank you.
Thank you. Florence from Georgia, go ahead.
Thank you. Gary, thank you so much for this reminder to take on this warfare. Beautiful readings. I'm so glad today and very grateful to learn how important it is to obey standing porter at the door of thought. This week, I've had many other tasks outside my regular daily duties, and I can say that with increased right thinking, from what I've learned here, I'm able to see through what the wrong thoughts that come attempt to do. For example, I felt a little down for no good reason, and immediately I knew this has come to steal my joy, my peace, because of the wonderful things God has done. And then I also knew that this is like the old days, whenever I was happy about something, some thinking would come to suggest that, it's going to be something bad is going to happen. But I'm so grateful to God because now I can immediately say, you are wrong. Some of the suggestions that came this week were aggressive thoughts about aging, for example, saying I can't do certain things. But I'm so glad that the dedication to use the truth we learn really gives us a discipline where to turn thought to. And beautiful thoughts came. Some of them were like, I could just, a very, very calm voice saying, do it with joy, which brought a smile and an overcoming strength to make free from the otherwise down-pulling thoughts. Then particular hymns came to thought and beautifully lifted away that false sense of any physical claim. the fact that particular hymns came and particular truths came show me that these are God's messages to comfort and to uplift. And with God so near, I was able to do everything every day that I feel was intended for me to do. Indeed, I'm so grateful to God, Christ Jesus, Mary Baker Eddy, and all who have written about Christian Science this truth, all who have proved this Christian warfare invaluable and worthwhile, and all who have, through their trials and tears, have proven and are committed, and those who are currently committed, to continue working to prove what a mighty power we have to change our lives. Very grateful to be here tonight.
Thank you. Mary.
I have a testimony to read from Canada tonight. I am truly grateful to be learning so much more of Christian Science every day from teachings and resources of our Plainfield Church. I have a dear friend whose daughter is struggling with drug addiction and seems to have lost her way. This lovely young lady called me recently as I had given her my phone number for her to call me if she wished to keep in touch and to let us know how she was doing. She has left her parents' home and sometimes for long periods, and no one knows where she is or what she is doing. Before we ended our phone call, she agreed for us to meet up soon, and we have a set time and place to do that. I was reading the recent magazine produced by your church, Love is the Liberator, and in it found the article entitled A Pure and Righteous Prayer. This prayer is set out in Colossians chapter 1, verses 9 to 13. The article states that this was a perfect prayer for anyone that you love, or it can be used for people that you don't even know, and that when you think about it, what really do you want for anyone but that they become closer to God? This is indeed a righteous prayer, and I am so grateful to have found this very timely article, to be including it in my prayerful work, not only for this beloved child of God, but for all children that might be struggling with drug-related issues. Thank you all very much. And then from our church website bulletin board from Florida, I'm so grateful for the music your church freely shares online and for the wonderful church services. This week, I listened to the beautiful hymn 371, sung by your congregation and played by your fine organist. This hymn was not yet known to me, and I was so happy to find it. The comforting words and sweet melody were a perfect remedy. And then she quotes from hymn 317, Still, still with thee, when purple morning breaketh, when the bird waketh, and the shadows flee. Fairer than morning, lovelier than the daylight, dawns the sweet consciousness, I am with thee. And then this from New York State. I would very much like to thank Ray for this particular week's watching point for October 20th. It has helped me tremendously as I am currently undergoing some challenges and as the example in the watch was beginning to lose interest in everything. This watch has awakened me. It is not a sign of spiritual growth to feel indifference or less interested in what is currently surrounding us, our world, our families, our church. As indicated in the watch also, our leader, Mrs. Eddy, never lost her interest in life, even to the very end. I'm very grateful for this watch, and thank you again for this selection. I'm grateful to be here tonight for the beautiful music and the readings. Christian Science has been such a wonderful boon in my life. I have been healed of chronic anxiety, depression, chronic physical problems, colds that would last all winter, stomach problems, marital problems, emotional problems, you name it. I was pretty much a wreck when I first came here. And through Christian Science, these problems have been healed permanently. It is such a wonderful way of life. Tonight, I am extremely grateful. I had a phone call a few weeks ago from someone I had never heard from before. I'm not sure if I'll hear from her again. I forget what she was inquiring about, but she mentioned a book that I had never heard of, and it is called The Comforter, Physics to Metaphysics, and it's by an Yvonne Reus, R-E-U-S. I had mentioned this once at a round table, but I hadn't read too much of it. And our friend Dale from Virginia, who is an avid reader, she'd been reading it, and she told me, you really have to get into this book. It's just wonderful. And it is just wonderful. I am so excited about it. This person took 7 years to write this book. She is a very dedicated Christian Scientist. She also has studied quantum physics. And quantum physics, for decades now, has proven many of the scientific truths that Mrs. Eddy has written in Science and Health with Key to the Scriptures. Now, we call our religion Christian Science because, yes, it is Christian, based on the teachings of Christ, the Beatitudes, the Sermon on the Mount, the love that is required to be Christian, but it is also a science, the rules and laws of the universe. So this person in this book, which is a big book, she goes into all the intertwining of what the scientists have found and how it relates to Christian Science. And she quotes many of the physicists. But I would like to quote, and we have talked about this before, but she quotes Albert Einstein, or the story about Albert Einstein, where she says, after one of Einstein's frequent visits to the New York's Fifth Church Reading Room, Christian Science, he had a conversation with its librarian, Mary Spalding, wife of the famous violinist Alfred Spalding. Einstein remarked, science and health is beyond this generation's understanding. It contains the pure science, and to think that a woman knew this over 80 years ago. He marveled that a woman had discovered the nothingness of matter, a fact with which advanced scientists of today have only recently begun to reason. In Einstein's words, matter as matter does not exist. Einstein was also a frequent visitor of the Princeton, New Jersey Reading Room. He would spend an hour or two just reading Science and Health. One day, as he was leaving, he said to the librarian, if everyone realized what is in that book, Science and Health, you would not have enough room anywhere to accommodate the people who would be clamoring for it. That was from Einstein because he saw what was in our textbook. And we here see it too. And Mrs. Eddy says the fewness and faithfulness of her followers. But when you realize you found this pearl of great price, it's hard not to want to shout it from the rooftops. So I would love to see more people reading this book because it's a leavening of truth. People who think they can't understand the science or the textbook, they'll read this book and they'll see how Christian Science goes into every area of your life, whether it's financial problems, physical problems, mental problems. It's the Word of God that heals, and it never fails to heal, and it does it simply and naturally. I'm so grateful that somehow God led me here and to be with you all tonight.
Thank you.